If you think back on all of your time on this planet, I wonder if you've ever had a moment where you have literally been punched in the gut, had the wind completely knocked out of you. Been a long time for me, and I know, believe it or not, just to look at me, it would surprise you probably to know that I didn't grow up as a fighter. That was not my thing. But I do remember one instance of having the wind knocked out of me. It was on the playground, and I'd climbed up to the top of the jungle gym. I slipped and fell, land flat on my back, and I do what you do when you fall down. I jumped up, and like nothing was wrong, and I ran over to the slide. I ran up the ladder to the top, and I got to the top of the slide, and I realized I can't breathe. And it took some time just sitting up there to get my breath back. And if you've ever had the wind knocked out of you, you know how that goes. Having the wind knocked out of you physically, it's a horrible feeling. But having the wind knocked out of you metaphorically is a horrible feeling as well. You understand how life is. Some days we get a phone call, we get a text, or we get bad news. And sometimes the bad news that comes our way can be just like a gut punch. I mean, it'll take the breath right out of us. And most of us, we've had to go to work on a day and try to act and function like things are normal when it's all that we can do to breathe that day. And we can't hardly breathe because of the storm that's going on in our life. Whatever it is that's just knocked the wind right out of us. Now, why bring this up? Well, for a couple of reasons. I think it sets up our text. And I also bring it up because I realize that on any given Sunday, whether it's those of us who assemble here at North Highlands, whether it's brothers or sisters in other congregations, people come together to offer up their worship to God, and many times there are folks in that audience that day who are trying to breathe again because of what life has done to them. In today's text, and you may remember last week, we talked a lot about the death of John the Baptist. And that's what's hovering in the background of today's text, the news that John the Baptist has died. It's going to have an effect on Jesus in our text today. That's the gut punch. That's the bad news. And this is what we get from Mark. And I want to begin in verse 29 of Mark 6 today. Set this up for us. It says, when his disciples heard about this, these are the disciples of John, they came and took away his body and laid it in a tomb. The apostles gathered together with Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while, for there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. They went away in the boat to a secluded place by themselves. Now, as we've gone through Mark, we've pretty much tried to stick with the text of Mark, but I do want to go over to Matthew chapter 14 because the parallel account from Matthew makes it very clear that the death of John is very much on the minds of Jesus and probably the apostles too at this point. Notice Matthew 14, verse 12 beginning. His disciples, again, the disciples of John, came and took away the body and buried it, and they went and reported to Jesus. Now, when Jesus heard about John, he withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself, and when the people heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. And so now, before we dive into the details, allow me to share one of the big ideas that I want you to remember and I want you to be thinking about as we notice this text this morning. Because through all that we will see from Jesus, remember this. His emotions, they were ordinary. But his compassion and his selflessness were extraordinary. In the aftermath of John's death, we're going to see the human side of Jesus, the humanity, the wanting to get away, the wanting to be alone. But we're also going to be reminded of his deity. And so you imagine Jesus receiving this bad news about John the Baptist, John who murdered because of his stance for truth, murdered because of his convictions, the idea that he wouldn't compromise his convictions. He's executed because someone in power made a bad vow during a big party, and then he wouldn't make it right. John, the one who's prepared the way for Jesus, prepared the way for the Messiah. And the ordinary and the very human emotion in the moment, the reaction in the moment from Jesus is, I need to be alone. And most of us, we've been there. The bad news comes, and we want to be alone. And if we cannot be alone, if other people are around, we're hoping in that moment that the other folks who are around will find a way to minister to us because we're hurting. And so that's the backstory. Jesus, whose emotions are very ordinary, he's hurting. And this news about John hovers like a dark cloud in the background. And so his desire, it's very ordinary, similar to the way you might react or I might react. He tries to get away, to pray, to be alone with the Father. But the multitudes, the people, they will not allow it. Now, they likely don't know what Jesus is going through. They don't know about this bad news that he's just gotten. They just know that they need to be near this man. And so in Mark chapter 6, verse 33 beginning, we get this. The people saw them going, and many recognized them and ran there together on foot from all the cities and got there ahead of them. When Jesus went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. Now, the fact that the crowd was able to follow and even arrive ahead of Jesus and the apostles is interesting, but the scholars tell us that on a windless day, people on foot could actually make the journey around the sea more quickly than you could go across it if you didn't have a wind behind you. And so that's evidently what happens. They're going around the side, and they're getting there before Jesus does. But then during this single day, we see Jesus and his compassion. You think about it, as the crowd first comes at him, he's trying to get out of the boat, and he sees all of these people. Who would have blamed Jesus in that moment had he just thrown his hands up and said, listen, you all need to back off for a while. You need to give me some space. You need to leave me alone. I've gotten bad news here. I need some time to myself. Nobody would have blamed him. And you think about how we treat folks when we know they're hurting. We'll extend grace. And sometimes when somebody's hurting, they will say things they would never otherwise say, and they say something that's hurtful, and we kind of let that go because we know they're hurting, and we know they'd never say that otherwise, and so we extend all kinds of grace to them when they lash out. But notice verse 34, what the text says. It says, Jesus felt compassion for them. Not forced, not contrived, not, well, I ought to at least act compassionate because if I don't act compassionate, then they may not want to listen to me the next time I try to teach them. Nothing like that. As Jesus sees need, his internal response is compassion. It's not really, I don't want to do this right now. Can't I catch a break? Why will they just not leave me alone for a moment? You think about for us when there's a situation and we know we need to be involved in a situation, and you think about the thoughts that sometimes flood our minds when we see a need. Even if our outward response is proper, sometimes the first things going on in our minds is everything but what it ought to be. But from Jesus we see compassion. And it also says that part of this compassion with him is he sees these people as being sheep who have no shepherd. And I like the way N.T. Wright described this. He said, when you think about King Herod, and I would call him wannabe King Herod, but he says, carousing with his cronies and winking at pretty girls and beheading prophets. You think about that, and then you think about his henchmen on the ground as grasping bullies. Here are these people, they're desperate for leadership. And here's this young prophet to whom they flock. And the question that's on the minds of the people, is this the king in waiting? He says that's the echo we've got to hear behind this. And of course, we know he is indeed the coming king. He is the Messiah. What we also know is that these folks don't get it. They're looking for a king to lead them on earth. And the kingdom of Jesus is about something very different. And so Jesus responds to these shepherdless sheep by teaching them many things. Now again, Mark gives us much less of the detail of Jesus' teaching. He portrays an active, on-the-move Jesus all the time. But then from Jesus, we also see his selflessness demonstrated through his service. Again, from our text, let's pick up the reading in verse 35 and go through verse 44. When it was already quite late, his disciples came to him and said, "This place is desolate. It's already quite late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go look." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. And he commanded them all to sit down by groups on the green grass. They sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up toward heaven, he blessed the food and broke the loaves, and he kept giving them to the disciples to set before them. And he divided up the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up 12 full baskets of the broken pieces and also of fish. There were 5,000 men who ate the loaves. You know, probably mamas in the audience today understand this better than anyone else, but mamas, you've probably been in front of the stove preparing a meal for family members when it's all you can do to stay on your feet, some type of sickness, something's wrong with you, and in that moment where you're serving your family when you much rather would be in bed, you don't do that because you're thinking about yourself in those moments. And while hurting himself, Jesus has been teaching. Matthew's account also indicates he's been healing the sick on this day. He's meeting the needs of people in a very, very selfless way. Now, you imagine being in Jesus' inner circle. Imagine being one of the 12, and you've been dealing with people all day. You've started the day tired. You've been dealing with people all day. Someone's likely been asking, "Okay, when will it be my turn for a healing?" And you've said, "I don't know. Please wait your turn." You've probably gone through this with people until you're tired of it. And now you see opportunity. Evening time, end of day. You're tired, you're hungry, crowd is tired, they're hungry, and so surely we've done enough for today, and so you go to Jesus and make your case. Listen, now we're out here in the middle of nowhere, no Waffle House, no McDonald's, there's nothing handy. Let's send these folks back into town so that they can find themselves something to eat. You bear in mind, 5,000 men for you lads to leaders people, for those of us who go to Nashville, 5,000, that's about what it takes to fill that big Delta ballroom when the whole thing's wide open. That's just the men, doesn't account for any women or children. It's a big group. And they've been kind of smart with Jesus. You want us to go spend 200 denarii, 200 days' wages to find some food to feed these people. They're saying we couldn't do this if we wanted to. And Jesus responds, "Hey, they don't need to go away. You need to give them something to eat." And we kind of understand how that goes sometimes. You've been at work and maybe it's near the end of the day and your boss walks in with the file folder and he kind of drops something on your desk and it's the impossible task. And I need you to get this done. And you're like, "I can't get that done. I can't get that done today. I may not get that done tomorrow." We've all had the impossible kind of dropped in front of us. That's kind of what Jesus does to them. You feed them. And so what's going to take? It's going to take Jesus' involvement in getting that done. 5 loaves, 2 fish, how are we going to do that? And Lord, even if we saw this as an opportunity to shut it down, be done for the day, we couldn't feed these people even if we were selfless enough to really want to. But then can you imagine seeing the miracle take place? Jesus begins to break those loaves and he hands some out, and then he's breaking and he's handing out some more, and he takes the fish and he's doing whatever he does, and somehow, some way, he just keeps passing out food until the whole multitude is fed. But then the other thing we notice from Jesus in this text is his care for these apostles. Notice verse 45 of Mark 6, 45 and 46. It says immediately, a favorite word for Mark's text, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side to Bethsaida, while he himself was sending the crowd away. After bidding them farewell, he left for the mountain to pray. And so as soon as these 12 baskets of food are gathered up, the leftovers, Jesus turns his attention to the apostles. They've worked all day. What they really needed was rest. Verse 45 says that he immediately sends them away. A couple of likely reasons. Obviously, they're tired. They begin this whole thing tired. They've been out on their preaching tour. They've come back. They've reported they need some rest. Jesus has stated that at the beginning of the text. Mark doesn't touch on this, but over in John chapter 6, verse 15, John tells us that coming out of this, many of the people in this multitude, they've got a mindset, they want to take Jesus by force and make him their king. And so Jesus may not want the 12 exposed to that kind of talk, because later on, even closer to the cross, we're going to understand they still don't understand the kind of kingdom that's coming. It's for the good of them. He wanted them, to move on. But no matter the reason, when we think about the way we do things today, it just seems crazy. The star of the show rarely stays around to clean up the mess. If you go to a concert, by the time you get to your car and you're on your way to go home, whoever performed that night, they're not in there sweeping the stage. Their tour bus is long gone, and it's everybody else that's left to clean up what's, turned into a big mess of an arena. But Jesus never regarded himself as the star of any show. And so he stays behind to minister, to send the crowd on their way. And so finally, after all of that on that day, selflessly serving while hurting himself, Jesus finally gets to go up on the mountain to pray. But it's still not over. Because somewhere out in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, we're going to see him serving in a very selfless way one more time. Notice verse 47 of our text. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, at about the fourth watch of the night. When you see fourth watch, think somewhere between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. He came to them walking on the sea, and he intended to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were utterly astonished. And so Jesus shows up walking on these rough, stormy waters, scares his guys half to death. Mark's version of the narrative does raise some questions. If you've read this out of the other Gospels, it's, why does he intend to walk past them? Why does he intend to do that? That's a question. Mark says he intends to walk past them, and he doesn't give us a good answer. Why does Mark's account not include the whole thing with Peter getting out of the boat and walking on the water briefly? Mark doesn't include that. Well, Mark, if Mark's gospel, by inspiration, of course, is based on the preaching and teaching of Peter later on, that may not have been one of Peter's favorite stories to tell on himself. The time that I didn't have enough faith to keep my eyes on Jesus. I don't know, but he doesn't include that. But Jesus again demonstrates his care for them. He identifies himself, calls on them to replace their fear with courage. He gets in the boat, and the wind that they've been fighting all night stops, and they're astonished. And when you look at that word in the New Testament, usually when you're finding the word astonished, it has something to do with somebody being in the presence of Jesus. And it's an interesting thing because, again, they've been with him for a long time now. And they're still amazed when he fixes the weather. Before we finish this morning, I think it's worth noting that this text should also cause us to think a little bit more about what probably was a very difficult time for the 12 apostles. Because based on all that's been going on around them, all that they've been involved in, they may not have been doing their best work during the feeding of the 5,000. And yet, Jesus still cared for them. Notice verses 51 and 52. Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were utterly astonished. And then verse 52, for they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their heart was hardened. The New Living there says their hearts were too hard to take it in. Hearts too hard to be impacted by the miracle of feeding 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And it's an interesting insight, and we only get it in Mark's narrative. Matthew and Luke and John, they don't include this. So what's going on here? Well, let's think about first what we do know. The apostles, and we get this term from Mark now, after they've been out representing Jesus, they are his messengers, and so now they're referred to as apostles, but they've been out on this preaching tour. They've just returned. Verse 30 tells us that. They're tired. They've had no time to eat. That's verses 31 and 32. And the reason they're obviously tired and hungry is because of all of this work they've been doing, work that is in support of Jesus' ministry. But let's think about some things we don't know. My best understanding is we don't know exactly how long their preaching and teaching tour lasted. We don't know how many days they were gone. We don't know. We don't know how many times they were positively versus negatively received as they were going city to city. We don't know how many times they were asked questions by people that they couldn't answer. We don't know how many times they had to wipe the dust off of their sandals as they left a town because people wouldn't listen to the message. We don't know that stuff. But then I also believe there's some implications that we can take from what we do read in the text. The apostles and all of the gospels kind of give you this. They seem to want to be rid of this crowd, which may be the reason Jesus won't buy into their solution. No, you're wanting to get rid of them. You think you've done enough, and so no, you're not going to get rid of them. We're going to take care of them right here. That may be the reason he places a seemingly impossible task on their plate. Because in my mind, if you're tired and you were hoping to get some rest and all that, I can see a very disengaged group of 12 men during this entire day. You know, kind of drumming their fingers while Jesus is teaching, playing on their phones, being very disengaged if they'd had phones to play on. I mean, you know, after all, Jesus, you know, we're tired and you promised us a meal and rest and to get away and all that. And here we go again. You're off here teaching. When in the world are you going to get done with this? I can envision 12 apostles on this day who are in a very bad mood. I can envision 12 men whose hearts just aren't in it that day. 12 men who just want it to be over. And if we're human, we've been there. Serving with a smile while irritated and frustrated on the inside, or only half-heartedly serving because of the mood we're in the moment, maybe without even having the obligatory smile on our face. Because Mark's very specific. He says the miracle, and really the 5,000 who are there, maybe they all know a miracle happened that day. It's a large group of people. I don't know if they all did or not, but Mark says that the miracle did not have an impact on the 12 because their hearts were hardened. Sending them away while he dismissed the rest of the crowd could have been Jesus' way of kind of taking them out of the game. You know, sometimes even a star player just doesn't have it on a day, and you'll see the coach just take him out of the game. You don't have it today. We're taking you out. This could have been Jesus' way of, you know, these guys need to be done for the day. They're not representing me well today. Their ministry isn't what it needs to be today. Could their hard hearts be the reason Jesus had intended to walk right past them out on the sea that night? Again, to speculate, we don't know. There are things we know. There are things we don't know. There are implications we believe we can get from the text. But notice this, because this is very clear. When they cry out to Jesus, he engages with them immediately. And that's important. Because we have those bad days sometimes where we're not at our best, we're not representing him at our best, and we want to get right. And when we want to be right with Jesus again, he responds immediately. We should count ourselves blessed to know that even on our bad days, Jesus doesn't give up on us. He still cares for us too. And for them, no matter what was going on with them, he never stopped caring for them. They didn't understand his ministry. They didn't understand the concept of his kingdom. They had their bad times, their bad moments, but he never gave up on them. He never stopped caring. He doesn't give up on us. He doesn't stop caring for us. And so we should walk and work and speak and serve from a place of overwhelming gratitude every single day because of our amazing Savior. And when we do realize that maybe we've hit the valley, we're not doing our best work, we're not representing Him well, we need to repent and we need to refocus right away. For the 12, it took being scared out of their minds on the Sea of Galilee for Jesus to recapture their attention. Let's use their example to our benefit, because it's better to get right than allowing things in our life to get really, really bad. In the meantime, we should always be seeking ways to elevate our level of genuine compassion, our service, our concern for others, because it's one of the ways we fulfill our mission. It's one of the ways that we fulfill our purpose. It's one of the ways we model our lives after Jesus. And so in the end, Jesus is anything but ordinary. The life that He lived was extraordinary. It reflected everything that He taught. And so as Will gets ready to lead us in the song of invitation today, I would simply ask, where are you today? Does Jesus have your heart? Are you His child today? Have you responded to Him in obedience based on the pattern revealed in Scripture? If not, why wait? Why not do what Brother GC did this past Thursday evening? Why not be immersed into Christ for the remission of your sins? Maybe you're here today and you're a Christian, and maybe you're going through one of those seasons of life where the things that have happened to you have caused your heart to be somewhat hardened. Allow Jesus to break your heart, to soften your heart again today. It begins by remembering all that He's done for you, the idea that He never gives up on you, the idea that He's there for you immediately when you're ready for Him to be in your life again. He needs you to be serving Him. He needs you to be fulfilling your purpose. And so if you need to come home today, we would welcome you with open arms. Our shepherds would be ready to pray with you and for you. If you have a need today, please let it be known while we stand and while we sing.
Hello, my name is Philip Goad, and I'm privileged to serve as the minister here at North Highlands Church of Christ. You may have heard something in today's lesson that has you asking some questions, and we would be thankful for the opportunity to set up a time to study the Bible with you. You can reach out to us through our Facebook page, or you can contact the church office at 256-332-3315. We'd also invite you to come out and worship with us in person. Our Sunday morning worship is at 9:30 a.m., followed by Bible classes for all ages at 10:45. We have a Sunday evening Bible study at 6 p.m. and a midweek Bible study on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Again, you can connect with us via our Facebook page, through our website, which is mynhcc.com. Also, we have a food bank that serves Franklin County on the third Saturday of every month from 9 to 11 a.m. This is one of the ways we serve our community, and so if you know of anyone who would benefit from food, please have them get in touch with us on the third Saturday of each month between 9 and 11 a.m. Thank you for watching today, and I look forward to connecting with you very soon.
Hello? This is he. Are you sure? Okay. Yeah, I'll be right there. I'm here to pick up Alden Call.
Are you his father?
Yes.
Did you fill this form out? We'll notify you of a court date within 30 days.
Dad, I know I messed up, and I know you're probably upset. I'm sorry.
Come on, bud. Let's get you home. Mom's gonna be worried.